Welcome to the December 13th, 2017 meeting of the Longmeadow School Committee. This meeting is called to order. This meeting is being recorded and aired live by LCTV. It is also being live streamed on longmeadow.org. It is a legal requirement for anyone else to disclose if they are recording this meeting. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to start our meeting today by acknowledging the unfortunate events that occurred over the past week in our schools. There are no words to describe the emotions I'm sure we all experienced as leaders of our district. It was a reminder that we are not immune to the challenges of today's world. What can separate us, however, is how we react to regrettable situations. What was clear to me this week was the deep commitment of our staff to the welfare of our students. The students in Longmeadow are their children as much as they are ours. Lesson plans and textbooks were set aside in order to prioritize the emotional well-being of our students. Staff was asked to have healthy, age-appropriate discussions with our students about these events with a strong message that they should never be afraid to speak up or to speak out when they experience or witness something that shouldn't happen. My hope is that this week helped to strengthen the commitment we have in Longmeadow to a culture that encourages our students to advocate for themselves and their peers and to seek help when it is needed. As school committee members, I think we all struggle with what our roles should be in situations like these. What can we do to help? How can we work together to make tomorrow a better day than today? There are policies and procedures that outline every step that should occur in the event of an emergency or a regrettable incident. In the weeks and months ahead, we can work with our administration to analyze what we did well this week and what we might need to improve on. We can ensure that our policies and procedures were followed and support adding more where needed. Most importantly, we can listen to feedback and advocate for programming to support those better tomorrows. Marty will provide us with an update on the Glenbrook incident, and Tom will report out to us on the status of the Whitson's incident. I'd like to thank everyone here at this table and in our schools for their commitment to ensuring the safety, security, and emotional well-being of our students. With that, I will look to visitor comments. I don't think we have any. And we can move on to school committee announcements and recognitions. Does anyone have anything to talk about for now? Okay. Seeing none, we will move to the superintendent's report.
Excuse me,
Oh,
Michelle.
sure.
Would you like me to read the correspondence?
Correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. So for correspondence, we have an emailed letter dated December 6, 2017 from Mr. Donald Jarvis at the Lower Pioneer Valley Career and Technical Education Center regarding the Student of the Month for November 2017. Longmeadow students honored are Nancy Lee, Information Support Services and Networking, and Joseph Klasick, Integrated Occupational Prep.
Thank you. And approval of minutes. I would take a motion, if we could, to approve the minutes.
I move that the school committee approve the minutes to the November 29, 2017 school committee meeting as presented.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Now we can move on to school committee announcements and recognition, and I think there wasn't any, so Marty, your superintendent report.
Sure. To echo Michelle's comments, it was a deeply saddening, troubling week last week, and I want to acknowledge the support and great counsel that we received from the school committee on this, and specifically the leadership that Michelle provided as we navigated through that situation. And you know, truly some of the very thoughtful emails that Michelle sent me were the inspiration for some of the communication that we made out to parents and staff. So thank you to the school committee, and thanks to Michelle in particular. So the incident, I think as everybody knows, it was a sexual assault between two students, and we're very confident that it was an isolated situation and that student safety in general was not compromised at that time, and certainly is not compromised now. in the sort of immediate aftermath, we worked closely with the Long Meadow Police, consulted with legal counsel, and conducted a very thorough investigation. And I want to also acknowledge the efforts of the Glenbrook administration, the counseling staff. They handled this with incredible professionalism, with incredible care, with incredible firmness. They were on it from the beginning, and it was continual dialogue back and forth between the Glenbrook administration and the central office staff, and also the advice and counsel that we received from other central office administrators, Sue, Tom, Jean Fontaine. It was a true team effort responding to this really sad event. I think we worked closely to develop a communication plan to parents. I was pleased that we were able to notify parents, frankly, before this hit social media or the media. We were had reason to believe that it would make its way to the newspapers, and that was a big part of the reason that we wanted to get the information out to parents. And we followed up with an email to parents to try to provide them with some resources that would assist them in having difficult conversations with their children, and maybe even guiding them on how they could talk to children about issues relating to sexual health, consent, boundaries, those kinds of things. And unfortunately, sort of at the national level and here locally, our children are getting thrust into these conversations, sometimes at times in their life when they're not ready for it and not prepared for it. And so, the more we can work with parents on these issues to kind of reach some mutual understandings about how to talk to kids, I think that's all the better. And as Michelle mentioned, going forward, we want to continue to kind of review our current practices. I think policy is an important part of that. Stephanie has talked to me about a role that the Policy Subcommittee might have in responding to this and ensuring that we have tight policies in this area. But we want to make sure that we have some programs in place to ensure that this, doesn't occur again, or at least reduce the chances that it could occur again. I think there's some great building blocks in place. We have, through our social emotional frameworks, through our health instruction, through the interventions and supports of counselors, there's a lot of pieces in place that we can build upon, and we want to continue to do that. And again, in ways that are age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, we want to make sure that kids are equipped with the skills that they need to make sure they understand issues relating to consent and boundaries and sexual health. And so that will be our work going forward. And I think Michelle said it well, and as no district is immune to these events, but we can separate ourselves from other communities in the way that we respond to this, and it's our intention to do that. So again, thanks for the patience and support of the community, thanks to the school committee, and thanks to all the administrators that were involved in this, and the staff as well. So on to some other more mundane but enjoyable topics to talk about. I want to mention last week I had an opportunity to visit Glenbrook and Williams to attend their Hour of Code assemblies. So the Hour of Code is sort of an international event that is meant to spark an interest in coding and computer science in children. And so we've got a couple of teachers at the middle school level in Lori Gallerani and Anne-Marie Salmon who have been great about putting together curriculum to ensure that our kids are exposed to the computer science standards. And I think you'll hear more about these computer science and digital literacy standards in the weeks ahead. There's a push, not only here in Long Meadow, but regionally and statewide, to ensure that our kids have opportunities to learn these standards. As I heard at the assembly last week, this is the fastest growing component of the local economy, and there's lots of opportunities for children, and we want to make sure our kids are equipped with those skills in those areas. So the Hour of Code assemblies were a great success. Thanks to Representative Brian Ash for attending and assisting us with that event. The The school committee has already voted a calendar for the 2018-2019 school year, but we have convened the calendar committee to look at the 2019-2020 calendar. And so we hope to bring you a recommendation before March. And the idea of the calendar committee is to set the start and end dates, the professional development days, and the placement of parent conferences. So that work is ongoing. You'll recall last year, the committee asked that we ensure that, parents have some way to provide us some feedback in terms of what their expectations are for the calendar. So we intend to do that. I'll talk to the principals about how we can gather some parent perspective on the school calendar, and certainly if the committee has some expectations or input, we're all ears as well. So that's for the 2019-2020 calendar. So we're actually well ahead of the contractual requirement to set that calendar, but we had a great meeting just yesterday. And a quick plug for Screenagers, January 23rd, evening event for the community. It's a documentary film about the role of technology in kids' lives. On the 24th, middle school children will see the same documentary that parents will have a chance to see on the 23rd. That's been a push of the Special Programs Committee is to make sure that when we bring in speakers or we have presentations, that parents have an opportunity to gather some information, but kids are hearing sort of the same message, and staff is as well. So it's sort of, again, promoting that idea that it's sort of a community conversation, not just a one-way conversation to parents. So Special Programs Committee, Screenagers, January 23rd,
Is that at
7 o'clock.
Okay.
7 o'clock. So there'll be more information going out to the families on that as well. So that is all I have. Yeah.
Okay.
And do we want to mention the?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
just
all
do
right,
the quick
okay.
plug after.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Sue, do you have a report for us?
I do. I think you've had it in your packet, so I won't go through it so deeply. But just wanted to say that November 9th, we had our third full day of district professional development. So students stayed home for the most part, and staff came in, and we had, over probably 20 topics for our 440-plus staff members. We were able to involve office staff, custodial staff this time around, and all of our educators. One of the courses was care of students with diabetes. We have a lot of students and staff that have really innovative care plans for diabetes, so that was really helpful. We hit data collection, social emotional learning. We looked at some new science curriculum in 6th grade, looked at curriculum mapping using our Atlas program, had some school safety events going on, in different areas. We had teachers with the opportunity to collaborate for ELA at elementary, which was great. They took a look at new standards, new frameworks, and then went back and worked together to plan units. So that was really helpful for them. We had some transition going on, again, between middle school and high school, and just want to thank the 9th graders. Some 9th graders volunteered to come in on their day off. I think you saw them in action, Marty. They came into the high school to meet with the 7th and 8th and 9th grade teachers to talk about what it was like to be a 9th grader and their expectations for ELA. I think that was really helpful for our 8th and 7th grade teachers at middle. A cool thing that came out of that collaboration day was that the middle school teachers would like to come to high school to observe some of the teaching that's going on and vice versa. So that's really great stuff when that happens. Let's see. We were able to also invite some staff who took advantage of coming to some of our workshops from the local private schools. We share some of our title grant funding with them. So we try to invite them to come over when we have PD that seems meaningful to them, and they were really appreciative of that, which is great. And we also, I think, opened up one of the workshops to our close coalition. I think, Stephanie, you came to that, right? So we'll try to do more of that in the future. I think involve more community members when things are pertinent, and keep that up. Let's see. I talk every time about Mike Flynn. I feel like I've talked out about him, but he's actually coming to middle school. They were looking forward to seeing him this year, so he's coming to do some math PD for our middle school on the 19th of December. And I think I included an article that I hope got into your packet from him that might help better explain about what students are doing with math these days. So if your kids are coming home saying, with this math, and you're saying, what are you guys doing? Maybe this will help you out. I'm not sure. December 8th, oh, it's passed. Our elementary students, some of them received a pilot report card, standards-based report card. I don't know if anybody here has students in elementary that got the standards-based report card. I won't ask you now for your feedback, but I'll take it at some point for sure. About 21 classrooms are taking part in the pilot, K through 5, and if your child is in a classroom, then you will get a feedback survey, and we hope that you send your feedback on that. The committee meets next week to look at the feedback, and in addition to the committee, there's a high-quality teacher share that happens between committee members to talk about standards-based grading and best practices along those lines. So that's been really helpful too. Further work of the community the committee will include rollout for next year, how parents will be educated, teachers' education, things like that. So. I think you are also aware that DESE has been working for the past couple of years on a new state history and social science framework, and it has not been revised since like 2007 maybe, so it's about due. They hope to have a version of it for public comment sometime in February to be voted on and approved by the end of this school year. So we'll have a year or two to look at those standards, unpack them, get familiar with them, and it'll be likely that we'll be needing to purchase resources to teach to those new standards. So just a heads up on that.
That would be
2-year heads up on that.
Not this budget cycle, but the following.
Yeah. Less of a heads up.
Okay.
Although I think we've talked about it before, there have been curriculum requests in a few different areas, but we definitely are updating our science at the middle in response to those standard changes and acceptance. And at the high school, world language, chemistry, calculus, and personal finance have all requested that we consider some upgrades to their resources. Okay.
And the sort of a report to the school committee on the report card after we gather the
feedback
from parents. We'll
I think we'll have a lot more information next time I report.
be able to report to the committee.
Yep. So the report card actually really requires us to have a mindset shift on how we look at students and their grading practices. So we look on the wellness team, or we're headed toward looking at growth mindset, and I'm sure everyone's heard about growth mindset. I think Carol Dweck is the pioneer in that, if you ever want to look at some cool stuff. But the research on growth mindset shows us that kids who believe that they can get smarter actually can get smarter. And the kind of the physical information on that is that brains are far more plastic than was originally thought. So it is an accurate statement to say that we can change our mindset and grow our brains even into adulthood, which is good for me. And that's what we're going to be tackling in our wellness committee coming up. I think I gave you a website to check out if you are in the mood to learn about growth mindset. So that's it from me.
Thank you. Thanks. Stephanie?
I just wanted to add, when you mentioned about the PD where Close was there, it was really neat because the custodians were also there, and it gave this sense of community, and we're all here. And so I like what you said about looking to expand that, because those custodians and hearing from them, they're around, they know what's going on, and this was specific to drug abuse and concealment, but also thinking about our lunch monitors and everyone and just the community at whole. And when we have these PDs offered, expanding that to everyone, and then the close community was there. People are coming, and they didn't have to, and it really had this nice feel of we're a community and we're kind of in this together.
Pretty meaningful. Felt
Yeah.
great. No. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know you guys always rave about Mike Flynn, and I read that article, and I think last meeting when I was talking about how I tell my daughter, you can't just memorize a formula, you have to understand why the formula is what it is. So I'm really impressed with the way he lays this out. I mean,
It's really helpful if you're
perfect.
struggling at home with your kids'
Yeah.
math homework.
Yeah.
For sure, read it. Mr. Massey.
So was this information distributed to parents?
The article has not gone out to
Okay.
parents, yeah, but I think we could recommend it.
I would think it would be,
Would be a bad
helpful
idea.
for parents to see it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure,
Okay.
good idea, thanks.
Great.
I'll just add regarding the custodians, they are there after hours too, which is very helpful, just to point out, when the bulk of the teachers have gone and they are throughout the building after hours and can see and watch and listen just like you. So.
Flies on the wall.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else for Sue? Okay, we'll move on to Tom.
So I have a couple items. We did receive the CopSync training, so the software I think I mentioned maybe a couple meetings ago. November 30th, they were here to give us our training for preparation for an initial rollout. I would say we'll probably hold off till after the holidays to send out the notification to staff. We'll probably keep it in a training mode also. I think it has the potential of requiring us to go back and review our procedure manuals and what our practice will be regarding certain situations now that this software will be available to us. So it'll be ongoing. Nick and I have some technical work we need to accomplish first and working with the company, but I definitely look forward to getting that in place and available for staff. Food service program is going through a Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It is an every 3-year requirement that they engage us in this review. They'll be looking primarily in regards to nutrition, meeting the standards, compliance with eligibility, and recording meals served to students. So they do a couple site visits to schools. They were out, I believe, on Monday at Blueberry, and are going to Glenbrook, I believe, on Thursday. At the end of the review, we'll receive a report. If there's any areas that they feel we need to possibly adjust some of our practice, we'll respond through a corrective action plan that then we can monitor to make sure that we're following through on. In regards to the budget and potential needs that'll be coming up, it's been ongoing, I'd say, for about a month now in terms of dialogue with administrators and some behind the scenes work that I do, looking at projections on various areas that from year to year we analyze and make determinations on. I'd say the next steps will be that the superintendent, myself, Sue, Jean, Nick will meet individually with principals to hear their feedback on any areas that they would like to advocate for or areas where we might need to focus possibly some attention, not only from a curriculum perspective, but from staffing. We'll be looking at enrollment projections, special ed programs, needs associated to various areas of our operation. I know later on our agenda we'll be talking more about the timeline in terms of the calendar for presentation to the school committee and so on, but I just thought I'd update you in terms of the process and where we're at. Just a couple other areas that I didn't mention on my report. I'll be participating in the next round of interviews for the facilities director. They have identified finalists, so that will be occurring today, later this afternoon. And hopefully we'll have a candidate to fill that opening shortly. Also, an update on capital project. You might recall earlier in the year I mentioned one of our capital projects is the replacement of boilers, one boiler at both Blueberry and Center School. The projects were supposed to have been completed by, I believe it was November 24th. So the boilers themselves are in place. The burner, which really is what ignites the fuel to heat the water, are not in. The lead time associated to these components is a little longer than what they expected. So there is definitely some concern. Both buildings have one boiler that is still operational, but there was concern that having the buildings function on one boiler with the cold weather that's predicted that started last night would not be sufficient to maintain a comfortable level for when it's occupied. So a decision was made to move forward and rent temporary heating units. The anticipation is that they would be delivered today. They are units that are stationed outside the buildings that get connected to an air intake vent in the building, get piped into the natural gas line, and they can run to supplement the existing boiler. So at night, when it's cold, and we want to bring in additional heat to make sure that we can bring the temperature up to a comfortable setting before occupancy, we'll have this available to us. The decision was made to rent them for a 4-week period just to be safe, to ensure that we have enough time to receive the burner component, get it installed, and get the new boilers up and running. So unfortunately, yeah, this issue just cropped up, so I thought it was important to let you know. And the last issue in regards to the Whitson's issue, the sexual assault incident that was reported in the media. Last week, Marty and I had a lengthy conversation with representatives from Whitson's where we had a discussion in regards to their response, the notification of receiving the complaint, who it went to, when was corporate notified, what was the response when they were notified, what action was taken, their investigation, the timeliness of their investigation, and the action taken. In the end, they ended up terminating the individual who the complaint was filed against. Based on the information that they provided to us, it seemed like their action was pretty swift in terms of responding to it. They didn't necessarily give us notification that the complaint was received or that they'd placed an individual on leave while they investigated it, which we did ask in the future that they give us notification that an employee has been put on leave while they investigate a situation. They don't necessarily have to share with us what the complaint is, but we just felt it was important that they communicate that to us prior to the situation being looked at instead of at the back end of it. We didn't find out about it until after the individual was terminated, which was kind of concerning on our part. Also, they reassured us that no employee was terminated or disciplined for filing a complaint of any manner to either the food service director or to the HR department at Whitson's. As I think it was reported in the news media, that was the case. So they reassured us that that is not the case. They did provide a public media release, which I gave copies to you here. I don't know that there's been any update to the story. I don't know if, I know people were having issues opening it.
Yeah, I wasn't able
Yeah, it
to
might have been
open it.
corrupted, but, so I did
Okay.
give you a paper copy of
Okay.
their release. We also had a conversation with them in regards to the training their employees receive, not only when they're hired, but we thought it was really important that they provide some updated sexual harassment training, not only in regards to, what it entails, but, just important, how do you file a claim, who do you file the claim with, what manner is the claim to be filed, just so that all employees are aware of and comfortable in knowing the process, which they have scheduled for December 22nd. So all team members will be engaged in that training before the holiday break. So, again, an unfortunate situation. The timing of it and the notification to us, I think, most certainly could have been handled better. But they did, I think, act reasonably in terms of their response. So.
And, I think it might be helpful to update the community in some way, the information that you gave us and that you provided us in the report, I think would be helpful for everyone to have.
Okay.
Being that it was in the media and information was
Sure.
disseminated that may or may not have been accurate. So I think, either this media release or some form of the email that you sent us would be great to distribute to the community if everyone's in agreement. Okay. Stephanie?
I'm gonna let Russ go.
Okay, Russ.
Okay. I have two questions. One is with Whitson's, I know we asked them if they would tell us if they agreed to do it.
They did.
Okay.
They told that they would
And-
most certainly communicate that expectation.
And I would want to know the basic, not me, but I would want you to know what the basic reason is for the person to be put out.
Yep.
Or what the complaint is, because depending on what it is, it could have some effect on students or the community that we want to look into independently. As far as the budget, I just wanted to let the committee know that the Finance Committee talked about when administration is looking at the budget and priorities and that type of thing, that they should consider the Metco issue as one issue. And secondarily, the athletic fees / coach salaries, all of that. We've been talking about that. So just to let the committee know that that's going to be an aspect of those discussions. Each year we have priorities, and those are two things that are kind of bubbling up as potential things to look at, so.
Stephanie?
Is Whitson's up for bids, their contract up?
Yes, so we're in the final year of a 5-year contract. It's really 1 year with 4 renewals initially, but yes, we are in the last year of the agreement, so we'd anticipate a bid would probably be advertised sometime in January or February.
And I know that they do their own review. Do we have any parent review on Whitson's, or is anything asked of parents as far as?
I wouldn't say formally. We have the food service advisory where we have parent input, but nothing formal that I'm aware of. We've done some surveys in the past, but not necessarily specific to their program, more about the offerings and choices and things like that.
I'd be curious, since their contract's up and it'll go out to bid, just to get some input from parents on how the whole system is working, not just nutrition-wise, but just in general. What are their thoughts? There are things outside of the meal that are offered. I'd be interested to hear what parents think about the snacks that are offered, things like that. So outside of what DESE will do, I'd be interested to hear some input from parents. I think that what happened with Whitson's, raised some concern on my part, and looking through how we, what the procedures are when we do have a vendor that's in the school and kind of is quasi under our control. And I appreciate you saying that you communicated with them the expectation that they would let us know when there's an issue. I'd like to see that in the contract. I'd like to see something really finalized with that, because that's concerning when there's a concern with staff that we're not aware of it. I also want to examine what's going on in each of the schools as far as the lunchrooms, who's down there, and what that looks like in each school across each lunch. That would be helpful to know. So it is this, and this is true of all schools who have a vendor come in for lunch. And so I think it gives us the raises things that we need to look at, and those are some things that I'd like to take a close look at as we go forward.
And just so you know, we do that ongoing at the food service, meetings, and often we're talking about the offerings, the snacks, that type
Okay.
of thing is very often the topic of conversation. And
Do you talk
agenda items.
about procedures like who's down in the lunchroom and how the whole lunch process kind of works, or is it more just about the offerings?
No, we talk about all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that goes, so maybe all those questions can be directed towards, are you on it? Who's on
I
it?
am. I'm the
Okay.
representative.
Finance sub does that more than I'd like, too.
We do. We talk about it in both places, more, specifically in food service, but then the financial aspect of, adding a server or that sort of
Yeah.
thing to alleviate the line. That
Okay.
ends up at
And
finance
then
sub as well.
staffing for lunch, that would go to you. And then when we're talking about like who's down there, what staff's down there, do we need somebody else down there, who,
Right.
all of that is.
And we have principals that are on the committee as well, and they're
Okay.
providing us input consistently on what's happening at their schools, and then.
So I will send my questions to you.
We have a meeting at some point in the next. I'd
Yeah,
say,
sometime in January.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly. Just one last thing, capital planning is scheduled to meet tomorrow evening, I believe, 7 p.m. So I will be attending to be there to answer any questions in regards to the committee's list of capital project requests for FY19.
And now typically would Jess be going to that, or is that?
Yeah, in the past, a representative
Okay.
has attended. I don't necessarily know that it's necessary that
Okay.
somebody be there, and we'll certainly feel like can speak to
Okay.
projects and the discussions that were had in regards to the priority and so on.
Okay.
Okay.
But we can ask her to go.
Yeah, I
And
just
I'm
don't
not
know
sure
if
she's
she's
actually,
yeah,
not.
up to it.
She,
Oh,
right.
okay.
So we may consider if I was asking in case you felt like somebody else needed to go in
Oh,
her
like an
absence.
Yeah, I don't feel somebody has
Okay.
to be there. I mean, unless there was something specific you strongly wanted to advocate for.
Okay,
But I think, I know where the committee stands.
sure, okay, all right.
Okay.
Just let us know.
Yep,
Thanks.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Tom? Thank you. And last but not least, my report, just pull it up here. We received word this week that Glenbrook and Williams Middle Schools did not advance in the MSBA's eligibility period this year. Though not unexpected, it is definitely a disappointment. SOI applications for 2018 will be accepted beginning Friday, January 5th. In light of this, I'm going to add an agenda item for a future meeting so that we can vote whether or not to submit statements of interests again as a committee. If we wish to do that and we vote on that, our middle school working group will meet with administration to review the applications and add any more information that might be needed, see if there's anything we can improve upon. From that point, we would bring them back to the committee for our approval, and then we'd need to submit them to the select board for their approval again. So basically, we need to redo the process that we went through this year. And I think that would begin by a vote of our committee, which we need to post on our agenda. And my intention would be to put that on the very next agenda, just so that we can know what steps to take going forward. Any other questions on that? Or comments? Russ?
I think we should kind of determine if the board is still okay with moving this forward and the town manager, because last time we kind of did a lot of discussion back and forth about whether we needed to do it or should do it. I don't know if we need to do that again or if it's going to go more smoothly.
Yeah,
So we should probably try to gauge that.
yeah.
Because I don't want to waste the board's time or our time trying to do a bunch of last time we did a whole bunch of presentations and everything else. I don't know if we need to do that again, but.
Right. My hope would be that we don't. I don't think anything, there's
Nothing's
been no
changed.
changeover with the
Yeah.
board since we gave them the information. I don't expect the documents to change a whole lot. Well, but again, we'll look to strengthen them in any way that we could, get some feedback from, MSBA if we're able to, as to what else, we might need to do. But, yeah, I think the hope would be that we do not need to go through that whole process again, in the way that we did last year.
Yeah.
Karen?
Just a little bit on that. Did we get any feedback from MSBA about what, like where we were on the list, or how well we fared, or what we needed to include? Or?
I've reached out to Diane Sullivan several times. She and I haven't connected. I suspect we will not receive any specific feedback.
Okay.
They have always maintained that there's not a queue, and I accept that. I believe that is the case, that there could be applicants that come in next year that they've never seen before that will vault to the front of the line. And then there'll be other applicants that will never be funded. So we will pry and ask some pointed questions and try to get some specific feedback, but they play it fairly close to the vest in terms of the feedback.
Just one other question.
Sure.
Applications, January 5th, you said they're going to start to accept? And
They
then how
open,
long does
yep.
that go out? Are we looking at 2 or 3 months time period, or?
It was the middle of April
Yeah.
That they're
last year.
Okay.
So we'll have plenty of time.
But
Okay.
again, I think the hope would be to expedite it and
Yeah,
try to
I
get in
would-
there as soon as we can and cross that off our to-do list.
I would assume
for the
that
year.
most of the legwork
We
was
did a
done
lot of
last
work
time in
last
terms
year.
of meeting with
Right.
Mr. Crane and so forth.
Right. Russ?
So I've been to some conferences where it's said there's no queue, but then they inadvertently slip, and we'll talk about the queue. And I don't think there is a queue. I think what it is they came out, looked at our buildings. We submitted a full report that they've read. If somebody else comes in next year and has a project that looks just like ours should be slightly above that one.
Okay.
So it's not that there's a queue per se. I think they're telling the truth about that. But human nature is they've seen ours, they've looked at ours. If ours looks just like or very similar to somebody else's, we should be ahead of that other one, and I bet we are. because we've already submitted. If we keep submitting, we probably have a better chance than somebody that's similar to us getting it that hasn't submitted. So that was really my point to the town last year, is it's not that I thought it was going to go through, because it seemed pretty likely it wouldn't. But I think if we submit for the next 5 years in a row, one of those 5 years, maybe it will go through. That's the hope, at least.
Stephanie?
I think I can speak for every parent who has a middle schooler. 5 years seems like a really long time with the condition of the school. So I think we have to, it's 5 years maybe, and then, if you get picked, then what do you do? So I think ultimately we're going to have to come up with some sort of plan, because, I've been in a lot of schools. We're in some, we need to come up with a plan, if we're not going to be funded for what we're going to do. So just throwing that out there, because I think a lot of parents are feeling, and staff are feeling the same way, like,
Yeah,
I think
and
that's a very good point.
Unfortunately, a lot of the improvements that need to happen aren't capital projects.
Yeah,
So,
no, I know.
regardless, we need to go through some sort of an application process for funding for what needs to happen. So,
Yeah.
we're in this sort of holding pattern, but, we need
know.
to figure out a way to take action in some way. Russ?
But I think if we take your idea, we didn't do the capital list for the town for middle school, but we could do one just for the middle schools and say, first thing we need to do is make it ADA compliant. Second thing we need to do is fix the roofs and put price tags next to those, so at least we can see if we don't have this happen in the next, 3 years. The subcommittee's gonna have to determine how long it is, but once we get to that point, we'd at least have a roadmap for what we're gonna do to the current schools.
Yeah.
And one thing is, based on population, do you just use one of them? Possibly, but, because if you keep looking, if you project out pre-K to 2, it's some possibility you might be able to use one school, actually, but that's a long way down the road.
I was just gonna say. Stephanie?
But I think your point is well taken, because I think we do have to be creative, if we do move to 1. Do we go back and do we include K through 6? What are our options? Can we be creative in figuring it out? And I think we do have to start thinking about different scenarios.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I'm in no way saying that should happen. I'm
No.
saying it only looks like 500 kids total between 2 schools, 250 at each would be very low. So it's something you have to consider as a long-term plan, is what would you do with that if it got that low?
And was 6th grade over at the middle school, at the elementary at one time, or was it 5th grade?
Fifth
Was
was
it
at the
reversed?
middle. Fifth was at the middle school.
5th was at the middle. So we've already pulled back.
Yeah. Okay. Also a reminder, we have a meeting with the select board to discuss the task force that we considered at our last joint meeting. We will attend their meeting on January 16th at 7 PM. Our role, or our portion in that meeting, will likely begin around 7:30 PM. So plan to arrive between 7 and 7:15 PM. At this point, the only item on our joint agenda is the task force. I'll let you know if anything changes.
So 7 o'clock here.
The meeting will begin at 7 o'clock, and then we'll be called into the meeting from there.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on my report? Okay, I have, Reggie provided me with a written report from the students. They put a suggestion box on Monday in the library. It's gift wrapped and it's clearly marked. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I printed this out, but I'm gonna reference it in this email. Didn't all show up for me. Okay. And clearly labeled so students know what it is, the suggestion box. Also, they met with Mr. Crease and decided it would be impractical, to sell snacks after school because they would have to pay for a cashier. I think we're going to follow up with that in food service and talk about that more in depth, because I think at one point we did try to initiate something for after-school sales of snacks, and I know that it was a good program. It just wasn't, I don't think the information got to the students so that word of mouth, traveled enough. I think they've got a great idea, and I'd like to talk about it more in food service and see what we can do. Additionally, they have not gotten any names from the middle school principals regarding students who want to come to the 15-minute SCSAC-led meetings. But I think they're going to continue working on that for us. And if any of you have any questions for Breggy on any of this, you can let me know, and I can communicate with him. Stephanie?
I wasn't here when he gave when he was talking about the food service part with the extra food. And I know based on the minutes, it said that they were thinking about reselling the food, but what's happening to the food? Are they donating it, the extra food that the kids aren't using?
Well, I think at the end of the day, there's some things that can be reused in some way, shape, or form. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of waste.
Okay.
But that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to the things that do need to be disposed of and can't be reused. What happens to that?
Because we don't have any
Certainly.
cost savings personal as a district for reusing the food that's already been purchased. So if the kids were wanting to take that food and have, Rachel's Table or something like that, pick it up on a daily basis and bring it places, that's maybe a possibility.
Yeah, we can look into that.
I think Center School does something like
Do
that.
they? Yeah.
Students can put items, unopened items that they're not going to consume, instead of throwing them away on a table that they either get brought to a shelter or
Yeah.
to Rachel's Table. So I'm not sure if it's consistent across all schools, but I know for sure Center does.
They're doing it,
I
so
think
that might be an
that.
option.
I think Center does it in conjunction with the Helping Hands program.
Okay.
So whenever
Okay.
they do like the sandwiches once a month, like they go through and check all to see what's not expired, and they put it all with the
Okay.
stuff that's going to the shelters.
So it may be, I know that Rachel's Table will even pick up
Yeah.
stuff, so it might be something that you
Yeah.
could schedule for them to come and
Yeah.
pick up on a daily kind of
Mhm.
deal, or even the pantry in Long Meadow. So I think
Yep.
there's options
Yep.
that may be kind of a good thing for the schools to engage
Yeah,
in.
we'll definitely look into it. I see Tom taking notes now, which is a good sign. All right. I think that's it for reports. We'll move on to subcommittee reports. Finance Subcommittee. Russ?
Okay, so we met on December 5th, and you'll see on the agenda, we have a few items to vote on. One of them is a building use request form. It's a National Multiple Sclerosis Society, and they're looking to use the building on April 29th. And so we have a motion that we could read. I guess I'll just read it. I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee approve the building use request from the National Multiple Sclerosis Society to use Long Meadow High School on Sunday, April 29, 2018.
Is there a second?
And my understanding is they have not used the facility before, but we do allow similar groups to use the high school.
Correct.
We have a motion on the table, or do we have, yes, and we have a second. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Great.
So, Tom, do you want me to try and explain the OT? It's the basic idea is, when we looked at the amount of services we need compared to a couple of years ago, it's increased in one of the categories, I can't remember which, I think direct services. And Jean Fontaine had indicated to the finance sub that she believed we needed to increase the level of OT services we could provide. There's also some thought that we might be able to do more of the evaluations in-house, some of the more basic evaluations. So her proposal is that we increase the OT, the amount of OT FTEs moving forward this year. The subcommittee did recommend it.
And provided in your packet, agenda item number 9, it starts with the facility use request, but the second page, Jean did a great job of basically outlining, the reasons for her recommendation to increase the OT. So if anyone has any questions on that, you can refer to that. She provided a table with some, data, as well as on the back page, she just stated her reasons. So I'll give you a second to review that. Tom?
I would just add that some of it is also built around the increased capacity we have for keeping students in district, and we can see the reduction in our out-of-district tuition lines, so the offset in terms of this increase would come from those lines. At some point, we would transfer the funds, but most certainly have been building or increasing capacity to keep students in district. But the services associated with some of the students, we didn't plan on the FTE to support those needs. So not only is she looking at an increase for this year, I think she kind of alluded to the potential of needing to increase the assistance, the OT assistance for next year.
How about a motion on the table? We have a recommended motion. Oh.
Yeah, we
yes.
do. I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee approve increasing the part-time .83 FTE occupational therapist position to full-time 1.0 FTE.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion, questions?
I have a
Stephanie?
question. So we'll get notification if an aide is added or, when that's posted. So I was wondering at what point this comes to us, where we're having to vote for an increase in the FTE. Is it because it's money is going to be pulled from somewhere else? Because this is largely guided by what the needs of the kids are. So it can fluctuate from year to year, just like transportation or anything. I mean, there's all those laws around special ed, and what each child needs is different. And so we'll get those postings of, an aide was added or something like that, and we didn't vote on it, or so I'm wondering what prompts it to come to us for approval.
The process is usually dictated around the positions not being in the budget. So those postings you might have seen about a position being filled is because there's already a budgeted slot, but maybe not filled, whether it be through attrition or somebody's out on a leave that we now need to fill it. So it's not necessarily in addition to the budget. This is varying from what the school committee approved in terms of the FTE associated to this position. In the past, if we've had to add paraprofessionals or assistants, we would come back through finance sub to school committee for your authorization. But currently, we have enough positions budgeted, so we haven't had to increase the number of FTEs for that particular area. But because this is changing what you approved, we usually bring it for school committee authorization. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm
Similar
just
to-
trying to remember the budget and what we do. We actually approve the number of FTEs, not just the line item?
Well, on the line item would include the FTEs also. So, I mean, in theory, we try to abide by the number of positions that are included based on not only the dollar amount, but the number of individuals that we plan for.
Okay.
Because we vote on transfers between line items. So ultimately, we vote the whole budget. But then during the year, if there's 10,000 in this line item, we really need, we can take 2 from there and put it over here where we need more money. The committee votes on each one of those transfers.
And this isn't a transfer, though, it's just moving it up.
Correct.
It's going to be taken from the same line item, or it's?
I will bring forward a transfer at some
After.
point, but I wanted to see if there
Okay.
was support for the increase, and then I'll bring forward a transfer at some point to move it.
It's really a 3-step process. It goes to finance sub, then it comes here, then you post, and then we vote on the actual transfer later. So 3 different votes, essentially.
Okay. And anytime we see notification of a position being posted, that position at some point has already existed.
Correct. Especially since this is going to carry into FY19's budget, I want you to know now that or it's been approved now, so I know I can carry it into FY19 at a 1.0 level instead of the .83 that was authorized this year.
Okay, any other questions related to the motion to increase the FTEs from .83 to 1.0 for occupational therapy? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And the motion passes. Okay. Next, Rick.
So we also talked about the FY19 budget instructions and the calendar. So you can obviously just read through the instructions, but the calendar, the Finance Subcommittee talked about, well, first of all, we're going to meet on January 10th and January 17th to go over the budget. And then we would like to hold the public hearing at 6 o'clock on January 31st. It's a tentative date we came up with. So we need to discuss with the committee if that works for everybody.
What was the date
And-
again, Russ?
January 31st.
At 6
At
PM.
6.
I think the other piece, Russ, was that we were planning on presenting it on the week before to the committee.
Okay.
So the committee would receive the budget information presentation from the superintendent on January 24th at our regular scheduled
That's right.
meeting. We would have to have a public hearing, which we tentatively looked at the 31st. And then the committee would then have some time to review the input, and then we would have to vote the meeting. And I think we were thinking we would do that maybe on the 14th of February at our regular scheduled meeting.
Yeah. The intent is to try not to have a whole bunch of extra meetings. So the only extra one for the whole committee would be January 31st.
Correct. And we'll send you an email, just notating that and making sure that we have a quorum for the 31st additional meeting. And then we will need to add a meeting, joint meeting with the select board. But potentially we can use an existing meeting for that.
Do we
budget
need
presentation.
a backup?
We need a
snow
backup
date?
snow day as well. So for the public hearing, we'll need a backup day, which, yeah.
Maybe the
So
next day, the 1st?
Usually that's what we do. What day is the 1st?
February 1st is a Thursday.
So,
Not only that, we usually have a backup for the vote itself,
Yeah.
just in case there's a weather event on the date that you're scheduled to approve the budget.
The date we're scheduled, the committee would be scheduled to approve is February 14th, is that
Yes.
correct?
and again, we can put this all out to you in an email. There'd be nothing we would be discussing other than dates and times, so we can take care of that scheduling over email.
Okay, the last item is FY18 general fund budget transfer. We considered the budget transfers listed in your agenda item number 9, which you could read through. And the committee, subcommittee again did recommend to make the transfers. So I'll read the motion. I move on the recommendation of the finance sub that the school committee approve the FY18 general fund transfer number 1 dated December 5th, 2017 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, abstentions. Motion passes. And we will move to the Policy Subcommittee. That is Stephanie?
Yes.
Okay.
So the policies have been up. We've not received any input. And you had received the track changes that Marty had sent. I don't know if there's anything.
We can entertain a motion if you want, and then have discussion.
Okay.
Sure.
I move on the recommendation of the Policy Subcommittee that the school committee adopt the policies IJND, access to digital resources, IJNDB, empowered digital use, and IJNDC, internet publication as presented and dated December 13th, 2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great, and discussion or questions? Seeing none, we can move to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passes. The Operations Subcommittee did not meet.
We are
correct?
meeting on this Friday. Yeah.
Friday, 15, okay. I'm going to take a 2-minute recess. I hope that's okay with everyone, because Beth has asked for us to call her. She can participate remotely, and just to get that call set up, we'll take a 2-minute recess. Thank you. in on the,
Tell Brian.
oh, Brian? I don't know if I ever heard.
Brian or Doug.
Are the Thank you. We are back again, and we have Beth Barron participating remotely. Thank you very much to everyone for waiting. LPVEC, there was nothing to report. SEAL, Stephanie?
They were scheduled to meet to do the rights and responsibilities, and the person who was coming to present from the Federation did not. So there will be rescheduling, and I think they're, they'll come back with a date for when that will be, so.
Okay, great. And food services, as we said earlier, our next meeting is January
23rd.
23rd. And we will update you after that meeting on what we discussed. Next on our agenda is our ongoing business. The district improvement plan, Marty and I decided that his time was better spent this past week on the events that had been occurring. So not as much time was able to be dedicated to the district improvement plan. Do you want to?
Yeah, still in process. I think the ideas have been collected, the input's been collected, and it's a matter of formatting it and wordsmithing it into a final plan for you. So I hope to be at your next meeting, and we'll get that out to you as soon as possible.
Great. And next on our agenda is the update on LHS Athletics. Dr. O'Shea?
Sure. So I think Mr. Maz and I will sort of tag team this. I'll start by saying we had a very productive meeting of the booster clubs with Principal Tom Landers, Athletic Director Mike Capitasto, and I. It was an opportunity to kind of share information, ensure that there was communication across the booster clubs, between the booster clubs, and that there was communication between the administration and the booster clubs. Athletic Director Capitasto had furnished the booster club representatives with a document that outlined some of our expectations as a district, and also notified them of some sort of best practice in regard to staying organized as a booster club. And so we got some feedback on that document, and the hope and expectation is that that document will be reviewed and updated. So the athletic director has solicited input. We're going to gather that, make some changes, feed the document back to the booster club, and the hope would be that that document would be the basis for some regular ongoing communication with the booster club, and it's a way to kind of anchor everybody in some agreements about what our needs and expectations are as a district, and it's also a way to keep the booster club activities kind of aligned and coordinated. So it was a very productive meeting. Principal Landers and I also shared with the booster club some of the conversations that were happening here at the school committee level with regard to fees and the budget, and they were appreciative of that conversation. And I would say if the information is not already posted, by tomorrow, all the budget information, the fee structure information will be posted to the high school website. So for anyone listening at home, if you have questions about the athletic budget, how it's structured, how the funds are allocated, that information will be readily available on the website. So I think we took some very, very important steps forward. Definitely some work still to be done. I think the Booster Club was appreciative of having a chance to understand the fee structure and the support from the general fund and how the gate receipts are deployed as a resource. So, and I appreciate everyone from the Booster Club coming out. I'm not sure if every sport was represented, but we had a large crowd. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions on that portion of the update?
Yeah.
Oh, is there going to be another portion?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll wait for that. Maybe they'll get answered.
So I was just going to ask, you
Yeah.
said there was a large representation.
Yeah.
Was it like fall? Did you?
All
include-
seasons.
Okay.
Fall,
So
winter,
was
and
it to
spring.
current booster chairs? Because that, as you know, it's flux. That will
Yeah, well,
change.
and that's right.
So when you say a booster club, we don't have a booster club
Yeah.
per se with representatives that stay, with each
They-
season
they
and each
change
year,
every
it's
year.
something new. So I
Yeah,
just
and-
wanted to.
And I think that's, and you hit on a really important point, and there is frequently turnover on the booster clubs, and the presidents, the representatives that they put forward change, and so having a document that can kind of keep us consistent and aligned year to year to year is really important. So we recognize that there's a lot of turnover. The night that we met, the booster clubs sent representatives. I don't know if it was the president or just their president's designee, but it was a good turnout.
Okay, so in terms of the document that you're preparing, like where was this information derived from?
So
I
the
think Russ
doc-
had talked about getting some materials
Right.
from somewhere else that it may, go to policy. I mean, where?
So Russ furnished us with some information that he had, that another district has used to coordinate the activities of the Booster Club, and so that would be hopefully reflected in the final product that we put together. If it's something that you would like Policy Sub to look at, or, certainly the committee as a whole to look at, we can ensure that happens. Some of this is guidance for the Booster Clubs. Some of it is information about MIAA requirements of booster clubs, and then some of it is just our own internal expectations of booster clubs.
Okay, so we did get Russ's information, okay.
Yes, yeah.
And then lastly, regarding the budget that's posted, is there anything different from what we discussed?
It should be all the information that you received as a
Okay.
committee. Yeah.
The information, I think that this eventually will serve to help everybody across the board. If Russ has information, could we have that sent to policy, just to take a look at it and see if it's something that
Sure.
would
Yeah.
be helpful for
Yeah.
that subcommittee to take a look at?
Yeah, actually, on that note, I was going to ask after the updates that, in light of the questions and concerns that have come forward recently, I think the best way for all of us to proceed would be to have, I think everything that's come up is related to either policy, operations, or finance sub. So I'd like to ask all three of the subcommittees to add the topic of the Lhs Athletics to their next agenda, and sort of review what, portion of the concerns or questions would relate to your subcommittee, and try to address them first there, and then we can come forward and have reports from you with the school committee. So, in the near future, if you could get that on your agenda, that would be great. Okay, any questions related to Marty's update? Over to Tom.
Well, Finance Sub did actually have some initial conversations based on picking up where conversations left off from school committee. So I think the way we left it was that I think Finance Sub kind of gave some direction as to some additional information they'd like to see collected and brought back for consideration, maybe for some recommendation on the structure, depending upon the detail. I think it was a little more detail in terms of some of the categories of expenses that are supported both through the fees or the general fund, to help kind of provide some additional information in regards to each sport, and maybe some of the areas that need some additional financial support. I think Russ indicated that we would look at the expected shortfall in the general fund, and whether or not it's something that can be attainable in FY19's consideration. I mean, we'll certainly will have to play that out as the budget is developed. But this probably will take place over the course, I'd say, over the next few months, especially with the budget process taking priority.
Correct. Russ?
I had an interesting conversation with a parent in town, and this person was saying that some places do, instead of a fee by sport and then you pay to get into the event, that you could have, and I know we have a version of this, but that you could just have essentially a family fee. that you pay for the year, and it gives you access to, the sports program, or maybe all the programs, extracurricular programs, so we just have one fee. Now, the problem is we can't make that fee be $1,000 or something, and it's got to be reasonable, but that might be worth looking into that concept somewhat, maybe finance sub. I think the policy subcommittee, that's what I was raising my hand about earlier, I think that's a good idea. And I think for them, the question of surveys, evaluations, should we do annual evaluations like we do with teachers? Those type of topics I think are really more policy sub. And I think finance can work on the fees and that type of thing, with more input from the AD and probably Principal Landers too.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I think some of the other information we discussed at finance was to make the information available, the fee structures and that sort of thing. So we were already seeing that, taking form. And I think, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think if we subdivide it and we continue to report out to each other, we can improve it all. Okay, Melanie or Stephanie?
I was also thinking too, when we discuss things like this, where everyone's hearing a lot of input from families and parents, that maybe we can, as a subcommittee, we don't publicize our meetings. I mean, they're on the calendar, but maybe letting parents know that we are meeting to discuss it, so that we can allow time for them to come in and talk, because I think that I think parents are feeling very separated and not feeling like their voices are heard, and I'm kind of feeling that swell. And so I think as a committee, whatever we can do to make those opportunities available to parents to let us know, and if we're putting this to the subcommittees, which I think is appropriate, just letting them know that it's on our agenda, please come. And that it's not as intimidating, there's no camera, and so they could have their voices heard. Sure. I think it would help, because I want parents to feel like they're being heard and that we're working on this. And I don't, when something like this comes up, I think their input is so important. So I want them to be a part of it, and maybe if we can figure out a way to let parents know that our meetings.
And, I think typically the subcommittee meetings don't allow for, participation by people other than the actual committee. But if you are able to, or you want to work in a small portion of it for visitor comments, you would put that on the agenda, just so we, because typically, again, it's not part of those meetings.
So maybe
participation, they're always open to the public for listening.
Right.
But if you want to, whoever's the chair of the subcommittee that is posting, they can post a visitor comments, and maybe in light of how much discussion there has been related to the athletics, we can provide some sort of an update to the community with our next steps right now. If we have policy subcommittee meeting, we can post that in that same email, and also encourage people to provide feedback to an email address specific to that arm. So if it's related to policy, they could email the policy subcommittee chair.
Can we, so if policy, and your request to have everyone put Lhs Athletics on it, so if policy meets, can we have, I don't know what medium we're using to let people know about meetings, but if we could say we're going to include a visitor comment during this, that this is what's on our agenda, if we can maybe promote these subcommittees a little bit more.
So typically they're posted, or they're always posted in the same way that our meetings are, with the agenda posted along with it, and it will allow, it will show the visitor comments, but, I think to take it a step further right now, if we want to, put out one portion of maybe Marty's communication to the district in saying that, LHS athletics are being, discussed at the subcommittee level right now, here are the 3 dates they're allowing for 10 minutes of visitor comments, or whatever you decide upon. You can take that extra step in posting, or in relaying the information to the community. If
I think that sounds good.
So why don't the chairs of these 3 subcommittees email me the dates and the times that they're meeting next, and if it's too soon, so Friday might be too soon for us to really inform the community, but the following one, you can let us know, and we'll get the information out. We'll figure out how to get the information out. But just if you give us your agenda and your date and time posting, and how much time I think you plan to allot for visitor comments, just so that you also make sure that you have time to address them in that subcommittee meeting. Okay. Russ?
So, I guess to tag along with what Stephanie was saying, one of the things with policy sub might also be, what is the process where do you go with questions, complaints? Do you go to the coach first, then the athletic director, then the principal, or the superintendent? Because I think that's the most common issue that keeps coming to me is, how do we really make complaints in a way that will get us a result that's not, negative or, creates a situation where the parent feels that they can't make a complaint because they're afraid there's going to be some negative outcome because of the complaint. And, whether that's happening or not, it seems to be something that keeps coming up. I mean, at least I keep getting that complaint. And so I think we need to address it through a policy, but also I think it's something that, probably all of us can work on with administration to try and figure out how can we make that process better? Because the fact that it comes to us at all is really not a good thing. That should be dealt with at a much lower level, and I think Marty and I briefly discussed that. But I think it's better for parents, better for the organization if we can figure out how to kind of get that back down to a level where it can be solved at the coach level or it can be solved at the AD level. That's much preferable to having it, get to the superintendent or get to us, which isn't saying it shouldn't, because it should if things aren't really working out the way they should be. But I'd like to get that to us, I want to make sure the athletic department functions well, and I think it does in many ways, but I think there's also things that we need to try to address so that we can make it function better.
I agree. So if anyone here has anything that they would like, similar to Russ's question for the policy subcommittee, as long as you don't put your opinion in it and you ask a question, could you please address this during policy subcommittee, this question? You can put that out to the chair of that particular subcommittee so they can be sure to address it in their subcommittee meetings. Again, just being careful that you don't provide opinion in your question, but you just ask them to address the issue or the question itself. Okay. Any other questions related to that?
Can I just ask a quick
Yep.
clarifying question? Tom, earlier you said that Metco and athletic fees were going to be something that may be put into the capital plan. Is that what you said? Did you say that, Russ?
Well, I said that there are things that, when we consider the budget, we usually have we have everything that's in the budget, and then sometimes we have these other 5 things.
Right.
Like Marty brought up tech last year, there's curriculum. So those are 2 things that might be on that kind of side list of things that, do we slide those into the regular
priority
budget?
list. So not for this year, you're talking about
For the coming year, for next school year.
next school year.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And I just want to check in with Beth. Do you have any questions, Beth, related to the discussion?
No, I'm hearing everyone fine, and I appreciate you saying that. I would guess that anything that we have questions or concerns about, we could also include when we email the chairperson of Policy Sub. We can also include questions and concerns that parents have brought to us.
Absolutely. Yes, that would be the
Okay.
hope.
So I agree with Russ wholeheartedly. I feel like I'd like to get back to that level where parents and students alike are feeling comfortable when they have a grievance, that it's able to be solved and that there will be no repercussions on the athlete. I think that's important.
Great. Okay, agreed. So if there's not any more discussion on the LHS athletics, we can move on to the new business, which is starting with a preliminary overnight field trip request from Long Meadow High School to travel to Italy in April of 2019. There's a recommended motion on our agenda. If I could entertain a motion from someone? Thanks, Karen.
I move on the recommendation of the superintendent, that the school committee approve the preliminary overnight field trip request to secure prices and make arrangements for students from Long Meadow High School to travel to Italy in April 2019.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, we will move to discussion and questions. Karen, do you have a question?
Just how are the students selected to participate in this?
Good question.
I think probably the first offer goes to the students that are part of the business classes that are sponsoring the trip, but I suspect they widen the opportunity to the whole student body after that. I'm not sure that the number of students off the top of my head.
I think it's at 24.
24, yeah.
So we don't know if all students have access to that trip, if they would want to.
I think, yeah, I'm guessing since it's capped at 24, that the first opportunity would go to the students in the business classes, that is related to the curriculum tie-in here.
Okay.
And then how they fill any open spots after that, I'd have to get that information for you.
Any other, Russ?
So how are they, for a student, it's $33.25, and I see you can make monthly payments, but I know growing up for me, there's no way I would ever come up with that type of money, or my parents wouldn't have. So are they fundraising? How are they coming up? I mean, some parents obviously have the money to just pay for that, I guess, but.
There hasn't been any fundraising proposals that have come to me to support this trip. I don't know if we've heard anything. Diane, we haven't heard any, there's no, yeah.
I mean, I've had.
So it's out of pocket as far as I know.
I know personally a number of people that the kids really wanted. They're in clubs, they wanted to do things like this, and they just couldn't afford it, didn't go. And it just seems, I'm not really sure what we can do about that as a committee or administration, but it does seem very unfortunate that that happens, that there's a member of a club that wants to do something, they can't do it. I mean, this is it's a great trip. It is for a public high school. It's kind of a really great trip. So I don't know, other than, I think we keep stating that in our meetings, but I'm not
Right.
sure what we should be doing about it.
It's a couple thoughts. I mean, one is that trips like this, there's a supplement. They're not part of the core curriculum. It happens during vacation week, during February vacation, so it's not, a student who does not go isn't disadvantaged in terms of the teacher's expectations. Certainly it's an enriching experience, I guess, for the kids that go, but there's no direct disadvantage if you choose not to attend or can't attend. And then the second thing I'd say is that we have begun to talk about that, frankly, with the administrators, about the field trips and the cost of field trips, and, are the trips prohibitive for too many families, and are there other options where we could bring the experience to the kids rather than expecting somehow that the kids have to go? I know that I will recognize that when this goes home and a kid puts this on the kitchen counter and says, Mom and Dad, I'd like to go, that there is
Well, it's
some
Mom and Dad, I want to go,
pressure.
and all my friends are going, and
Yeah.
I'm not.
Right.
That's really
Yeah.
that's the part I've heard from a bunch of people, is that they're just,
We've,
when they're kids, one of the only ones not going. That's
Yeah.
really the issue.
We've talked about virtual field trips. We've talked about bringing museum presenters into schools. They do these, they'll have trunks of artifacts that they can bring to kids. So there's different ways, and I think increasingly our principals are talking about that, about, are we asking too much of families? And again, this is supplemental. It's not required. It's not part of the classroom expectations, but it is an opportunity that our teachers facilitate. So.
Stephanie?
I'll say we talked a little bit, just briefly, starting it in policy sub. I do think that there's more that we can do. I think in terms of policy, we can look at when there are these field trips, that fundraising, the opportunity to fundraise, as much as everyone hates fundraising, it does help with those who can't meet some of the costs. I think there's also, the discussion needs to be had on capping the cost on these. When you are only allowing 24 people, you are going to take 24 people who can more likely easily afford this, and where it's not a question. So I do think that there's more that we need to look at with these programs. And then, is it the entire, there's 24 kids, but does that mean a good chunk of the class is going? And what percentage are we looking at? You know, if 90% of a history class or something is going on a field trip, you know, we have to look at that too, because then that's a problem. So they're enriching, but it also puts kids in a different position because they're getting enrichment based on their ability to
Yeah.
pay. So I do think we have to look at it, and it sounds like they're having that discussion.
Yeah, I just would want to distinguish this from the trips that happen during the school day, which we want to make accessible to all kids. You know, a February trip overseas, we might look at differently than a trip to Sturbridge Village or something during the school day. That's a
Yeah.
trip that we would
Yeah.
want to make sure that all kids had an opportunity to go, and that the costs associated are reasonable, and that we're covering families that can't afford the fees. So, but I agree. I mean, I think we do need to start to take a look at this. I think travel costs have increased in recent years.
So I think I would love for Policy Sub to continue to look at, you know, how we define a field trip, you know, as being, you know, if it's excluding a high percentage of students within a student body. So, you know, similar to the Glenbrook and the Williams Middle School field trips that are, I think we can consider them of high expense. But I think, you know, I'd like to continue that conversation at the subcommittee level. In particular to the motion that we have on the table for this field trip, Long Meadow High School, to travel to Italy in 2019. Do we have any more questions or discussion on it, and should we take a vote? Okay. So Beth, do you have any questions or comments on the field trip request?
No,
motion on the
I
table?
would just add that I think Marty, I like what Marty had to say. It's supplemental, it is extra. It is over a school break. It's almost as if you're sending on a school-sponsored spring break trip. I will say that my senior is going to Greece and Italy with her Latin class, but I have had no problem at all, freshman, sophomore, and junior year, of having the slip come home and saying no. It shouldn't be a hardship on families, but parents should also feel that you're under no obligation to participate. And as a parent, that's your responsibility to say, we're not doing this year. But whatever works for your family. But I think it's important that the distinction is made between an extra supplemental and the policy that we make as far as field trips that are taken during the regular school day.
Agreed.
If that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. Stephanie?
Following up on that, I think that this one falls into that category, but we do have field trips that are actually disruptive to the schools because so many kids leave it, and then the classrooms are empty, and so instruction is not going on, and I think we need to examine that as well. Not only the kids who can't go, but what happens to instruction when everybody is gone, and that's during the regular school day. So I think that, yeah, we need to just look at it all.
Yeah, so I think that topic is separate, and we can add that to our school committee agenda after Policy Sub takes a look at it and updates us on it. How's that sound? Okay. If there isn't any more question, or if there aren't any more questions or any more discussion, let's go to a vote on the motion on the table to approve the preliminary overnight field trip request to travel to Italy in April of 2019 for the Long Meadow High School. We'll need to do a roll call vote. So we will start with Beth.
Okay, Michelle, I'm going to vote, and then I'm unfortunately going to have to sign out.
Okay,
So,
sounds great.
Beth Barron, aye,
Okay.
Karen Moore and I.
and I'm going to hang up.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Hi, Beth.
All
Melanie
right, thanks so much.
Rothstein.
Bye-bye.
Aye.
Michelle Grodzki, aye.
Russell Dupre, aye.
Stephanie Jasmine, aye.
Okay, the motion passes. The next on our agenda is an executive session for this meeting. We need to entertain a motion to move into that executive session.
I move that the school committee adjourn into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy as it relates to collective bargaining with Unit A, and to consider the release of executive session minutes from previous meetings according to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 22G, not to reconvene into open session.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And we do need a roll call vote for this because it's executive session, so.
Karen Moore and I.
Melanie Rothstein, aye.
Michelle Grodzki, aye.
Russell Dupre, aye.
Stephanie Jasmine, aye.
Okay, great. Let's take a 2-minute recess and then come back for our executive session.